I don't know if you caught that. How easy was it to get Zach to say, yeah, life comes from the Lord. Yep, I follow that. I'm on that. And yeah, you got to have that connection. He was with it. And I think even Matthew was too. It was harder. He was playing a little more poker face than Zach was, but that was really easy. If I give that same talk to a bunch of 20-year-olds, oh, wait a second, chemistry, blah, 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 there was a willingness to be led right there. And one of the things that Jen and I have talked about over the last year is, our boy is going to stop being a little kid pretty soon and start being an adolescent. And so we've been trying to enjoy having a little boy around the house as much as we can the last year, and just appreciating the things that are still there of a little boy, because it's not going to be there a whole lot longer. And one of the things that happened in this trip that we were on is we ended up in Florida at the end, and we spent a few days with my family, and my brother's got two little girls. Now, girls are not something that, we have much in our life. It's always little boys, even if it's not our boy, it's somebody else's boys, but it's always boys. And so he's got these little girls that are 5 and 8, and they're as girly as they come. Kind of my running joke about little girls, and if I ever want to needle Zach a little bit, I'll say, oh, you want some rainbows and unicorns. That's what little girls want, rainbows and unicorns. So I had a good laugh when we get to Daytona Beach, and my niece has a backpack that literally has rainbows and unicorns all over it. And I'm like, it's not an exaggeration of truth. This is what little girls do. They have rainbows and unicorns on things. This is different. So a little 5-year-old, she'll walk around. We had this I wouldn't call it a hotel, but an old motel. It was a big property in the back, and so we just kind of had some space, and she'd be walking around in her little bathing suit with a pink tutu, because you never know when you're just going to break out into dance. And that's what she would do. She'd walk around and all of a sudden just do a little twirl, break into song, and she was just having a good time. Didn't worry about anybody else and what they were looking at her or thinking about her. Didn't matter if she had Hello Kitty on the bathing suit and something that didn't match in the bottom. Couldn't care less. She was happy, and she was just going to burst into song, and it was amazing. I loved it. Loved it. And it was, for the whole trip, we had a great time. And I expected to have a good time at Disney World. How can you get better than that? But to be around the little kids it was refreshing. It really was. And it had me think about all of you people who have your grandkids, and I often think that you're nuts for all the amount of time you spend babysitting and following them around, and think, what's wrong with you people? To have a life, go travel. You don't need to, confine yourself to these grandchildren. And then I think, oh no, maybe this isn't such foolishness after all. Maybe hanging out with all these little kids actually is a lot of fun. And even my sister, she brought over one of her friends and had a 2.5-year-old little boy, and just chucking him around in the swimming pool was lots of fun. And I was like, yeah, I do miss this. And so it had me thinking a lot about childhood innocence, because as you just look into their eyes, it's just amazing. You just see the openness of it. You can see that they're at an age where mom and dad, they're superheroes. They know everything. They can protect you from everything. And the surprise and delight they have when parents say, this is the answer, or this is what's going to happen, and it comes true. And their minds are blown. They're like, how did you know? For years, I've told Zach, that's because daddies know everything. That's been the standard line in the house. Daddies know everything. He's getting to the point where he kind of realizes Daddy doesn't quite know everything. But when they're little, that's what it is. They have this belief and this presence about parents that they really are like superheroes. So The stories in the Word kind of back up some of this stuff about how, that's heaven right there. That's heavenly life. In the Gospel of Matthew, we have the ministry of Jesus is coming to a close. He's been around for 33 years. The end is near. He knows it. He knows the end's coming. And they journey for the last time into Galilee. And as they're there, the disciples kind of get into this argument about, well, who's the greatest? And in their mind, it's one of them. Who's been following the best? Who's the smartest, the most with it, the most successful disciple of them all? Gospel of Matthew records the incident like this. At that time, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, "Who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" He called a little child to them and placed the child among them. And he said, "Truly I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever takes the lowly position of this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me." I'd imagine, a lot of you, if not all of you, have heard this little snippet a gazillion times in your life. But this little bit just cuts against so much of what we hear in the world. All right, in the world we are trying hard to open up our experiences, to expand the amount of experiences we have. Nothing is bad anymore. It's just different. We try to keep expanding so that we can know more because, knowledge is the pursuit. And knowledge has its place. We are supposed to learn things. We're supposed to have knowledge so that we can be useful in life and apply that knowledge. It's not a thing against knowledge. But we aren't supposed to just go out and experience everything that there is to be experienced. He's saying right here, unless you change. And that's a phrase we don't get in the world a whole lot these days. Unless you change. It's no, you're great the way you are. Everything's fine. Everybody should be accepted and tolerated, and everybody's loved and celebrated. And the truth is, the Lord loves you no matter what. But if you want to enter that kingdom of heaven, you've got to change. You've got to change and be like what? Be like that little kid who sees that his parents are a rock star, superhero, and Mr. and Mrs. Incredible all rolled into one. It's all of that put together. That's how we have to look at the Lord. Just when you tell a little kid, hey, we're going to go do this, and generally pretty amenable to things unless they're not fed or they're tired or whatever. but little kids are pretty pliable, and we have to be like that towards the Lord. This isn't a one-off either. The Lord repeats this thing. He's just a chapter later. Matthew chapter 19, then the people brought little children to Jesus for him to place his hands on them and to pray for them. The disciples rebuked them. Jesus said, "Let the little children come to me. Do not hinder them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these." When he had placed his hands on them, he went on from there. I was thinking about this just in terms of his journey. He knows what's coming down the road for him. He knows he's got misery in Jerusalem. There's going to be a big fanfare, but he knows it's going to fizzle out. He knows this whole crucifixion thing and betrayal is going to happen. There's no fun. And I can just imagine him going, you know what? Just give me some of these little kids. Just let me enjoy this world a little bit before I go. Let me feel what I'm really wanting out of people. Let me feel that little bit of heaven right here, right now. The kingdom of heaven is these people right here, these little ones. Yeah, bring them to me. That's what I hear the Lord wanting. And that's what he wants for all of us. He's like, come on back. Come on back. That's the call of our life, is to come back to him. And it can be done, but it requires some work, because throughout life we leave. Just as, Zach and Matthew and all the other little kids that come through here, they're going to lose that innocence. And yet, seeing the little kids is a reminder of how much we should put the effort into protecting that innocence. It's going to go away sooner or later. There's no reason to kick it out the door before it has to. And at the risk of being a prude and, oh, we don't want our kid to see this movie or go this place or have this experience. There's value in protecting that innocence as long as we can. Because the Lord teaches us that, how he brings us back to him in the end is through those childhood experiences, through those remains, those feelings and memories of love and of innocence and of peace of childhood. The story of Adam and Eve, as you know how it goes, they eventually eat from the tree. In Genesis chapter 3 this is how it ends up. He says, God made garments of skin for Adam and his wife, and he clothed them. The innocence is lost. They're no longer naked and unashamed. They got to have clothes. Man has now become like one of us, knowing good and evil. They've had experience. He must not be allowed to reach out his hand and also take from the tree of life and eat and live forever. So the Lord banished him from the Garden of Eden to work the ground from which he had been taken. After he drove the man out, he placed on the east side of the Garden of Eden cherubim and a flaming sword flashing back and forth to guard the way to the tree of life. It's sad, to read that. We think, oh, maybe God's being unfair. But this is just a story telling us the reality that once the innocence is lost, you can't go back to that. And this is a story, Adam and Eve is a story about that innocence of ignorance. They don't have knowledge. They're not really truly like heaven because, they haven't really made themselves good. They haven't made themselves evil either. So the choice really hasn't been made. But once you've eaten from that knowledge and you have that knowledge and experience, you can't go back. You just can't go back. You can go back to having innocence, but it won't be the same kind of innocence that you once had. Because that experience takes away that innocence. There's this passage from Secrets of Heaven talks about these successive states and how angels are with us when we're kids and how that experience and knowledge pushes them away. It's number 2303 in Secrets of Heaven, and it says, angelic spirits went on to speak about young children on earth. They said that immediately after these are born, angels from the heaven of innocence are present with them. Then in the next phase of their life, angels from the heaven of serenity of peace. And after that, angels from the communities of charity. And then, as innocence and charity diminish when they are older children, different angels again are present with them. When at length they become more grown up and enter upon a life alien to charity, angels are indeed present though more remotely, but in accordance with the ends of life, which are especially regulated by the angels, by a continual installation by them of ends that are good and turning aside of ends that are bad. But to the extent that they are able or not able to do this, they flow in more nearly or more remotely. So to the extent that the children still have a purpose, a desire to do good, these angels can keep staying with us. But as we change our ends to do bad things and things that are not good, those angels farther depart. And that's what we see in the Word, is how the Lord's in the garden with them, and as the stories go, the Lord's more and more remote throughout the story. But it's throughout the story that we're supposed to be trying to make that turn, come back, and follow the Lord. And what are these stories all saying? Yeah, follow the Lord, do what I say, and everything will be okay. And aren't these the exact same words as parents we say to our children? Look, Just do this. It'll be great. It'll be fine. And as little kids, they're generally pretty receptive to that. But as they get older and you tell them, look, I told you, buddy, don't go out and drink too much because you're going to have pain in the morning. You're going to have a hangover. It's going to suck. You're going to make a fool of yourself. Don't do it. And how many teenagers go out and drink too much and have hangovers and have to get sick and spend their night with a face in the toilet because of it? A lot of them. Have they all been warned about it? Yeah. And the Lord just keeps saying, follow me. Just listen. Just listen. That's the kind of that innocence he's wanting us to have. And eventually, the experiences of our life can bring us back to that. The experiences of having, bad things happen can lead us to say, all right, yep, I'm going to turn and try to regain that innocence. I found a story about a guy who was actively searching for innocence, which I found was pretty impressive. I mean, how many of us think in that kind of terms? But he writes about how he, as a teenager and a young adult, had a very full sexual experience, and that he did not limit himself, and he would use lies, deceit, money, whatever he had to get the experience that he wanted. He writes that eventually he found that all that experience corrupted him. He realized that he was losing the ability to not think in sexual terms. He's like, every joke became a dirty joke. Every girl became a girl that I hadn't have or wanted to have or fantasized about. Everything became a sexual experience for him. And he realized that his will to resist that kind of stuff had just vanished. There was no way to resist. And he realizes that this is because he's just become so corrupted by this kind of new self, this sexualized version of himself. He's mixed all this bad stuff in with something that's inherently good. He realizes he's lost his innocence. And so he goes on this kind of personal trek and decides to re-seek out becoming innocent, because he realizes that he's got no real value anymore. He equates himself to being like a glass pitcher that's been broken. He's like, well, the pitcher had value, but now it's broken. It can't hold water. It can't do what it's designed to do. It once was beautiful, now it's not. And he's working through all this process of feeling guilty for all the stuff he's done. And as he meets and falls in love with this new woman, he realizes all the stuff he has to give up, but also realizing all the baggage that he has that she doesn't, because she hasn't had this experience. How can she love him when all that he's done is not good, and she hasn't done anything? And as the relationship develops, he never kisses her. He made a promise to her, I'm not going to kiss you until we get married. And she, hearing this, says, oh, well, what have you done? She wants to know what special things, what new things can we do together? And he says, let's not have this conversation, because he knows there's nothing that he can share with her that he hasn't had already. But throughout this 3-year courtship, he's trying to find innocence with this woman. And eventually, he says, yeah, we get married. And we kiss for the first time at the church. And he's like, I felt the beginning of the restoration of innocence. After the marriage is done, the woman pushes a little bit more, saying, well, can we have that talk about what's new to you and what we can sharing new together? And he reluctantly says, well, look, he's told her over the years, you're not going to like the answer. This isn't going to be good. But she feels like she's in the place where she can handle this, and he tells her the full truth. And the result is pain and suffering for both. She's hurting, and he writes that he thinks he cried more than she did because of what had all happened. But he also writes that in the end of it, he feels like his innocence was restored because on the end of it, they came through it, and he realized that she still loved him, that love was still real, and it really didn't matter what he'd done in the past, and that she felt that there was a clearing of the air. There was no mystery, no boogeyman hiding in the closet because it was all in front. It was a painful process, but he's like, period of abstinence followed by honesty restored the innocence, and that now they feel that they are in a relationship that is the way it's supposed to be, that the acts are acts of love, and that's what is supposed to happen. It brings me to this story, this last reading of the day from 1 Samuel, where Hannah is praying for a child. She has no child. She goes to the temple, prays for the child. And how does that story end? Well, it ends by the returning of the child to the temple. Hannah makes a vow saying, Lord Almighty, if you will only look on your servant's misery and remember me, and not forget your servant, but give her a son, then I will give him to the Lord for all the days of my life, and no razor will ever be used on his head. That's the circle. It's going back to the Lord. When the bull had been sacrificed, they brought the boy to Eli, and she said to him, Pardon me, my Lord, as surely as you live, I am the woman who stood here beside you praying to the Lord. I prayed for this child, and the Lord granted me what I asked of him. So now I give him to the Lord. For his whole life he will be given over to the Lord. And he worshiped the Lord there. It's that end where, the child, Samuel, becomes a great prophet. And he follows the Lord all his life. He does everything he says. Everything works out for Samuel. Samuel is that innocent child grown up. And when we see the little children and how they follow their parents and do what they're told, and they're easy to work with, that's a picture of a regenerate person, almost. It's almost. The difference is a regenerate person has wisdom, which is that ability to follow what the Lord says, and having gone through life to have that wisdom be their own, to make those choices of being good their own. We too can be innocent. We've all done dumb things, and we've all had experiences where we feel like, I've done this and I don't deserve to be loved for the stupid thing that I've done. Maybe it's something you did 30 years ago, 40 years ago. Maybe it's something you did 2 months ago. But we have all done things where we think, I don't deserve this. But the Lord's saying, yeah, you can still be innocent. It just requires that change of pace. You've got to change and be like little children. So when you need a reminder of what that's like, just go out and find yourself a little kid. Maybe it's a grandkid, a niece, a nephew, whatever. Hang out with them a little while and just kind of let your eyes see into their eyes and see how